So we'll be making a scarecrow out of scrap wood. It's very rustic and fun for the season. I've got a piece of wood that's about 9 inches tall and about 4 or 5 inches wide. Again, a scrap piece of wood. This happens to be primed white, but you can use the natural color. Because this is white, I'm going to paint it an ivory tone. But if you have a piece of wood that's already natural and you like that look, you can keep it the natural color and not paint it at all. What I'm using as a side piece to make the hat is actually a shim, which is very inexpensive. You can buy a package of them in the hardware store or the home store, wherever you can find it. It's very inexpensive. So very simple. Hopefully, perhaps you even have these pieces as scraps at home. Another alternative would be perhaps making it out of cardboard. If you're getting orders from Amazon and you have extra boxes, feel free to cut them up and make little scarecrows from them. And scrap fabric is part of this project as well. If you have fabric around or an old shirt that you want to cut up, look at something that has maybe a lot of patterns with color, and that can be used for the little bandana that we're going to add to our scarecrow. So to start, we're using acrylic paints. I am going to base the face with an ivory color, but just so I don't have to paint the entire thing, I'm going to use my shim to lay out where the hat is going to go on this. I want to make sure I leave enough room for my face, and I'm adding a bandana at the bottom. So I just want to make sure I don't want my hat to become too low and I have no room for the bandana. So I'm keeping it up probably maybe 2 inches, 1.5 to 2 inches on one side, and giving it a little bit of a tilt. And just to keep that in mind, I'm going to use a pencil to kind of trace that off. And we are going to paint down the sides as well, so make sure you mark those off as well. And you can put the brim of the hat aside to start. Using a large or medium flat brush, I'm going to use that as my brush to do the base coat. And the ivory will probably go on thin first. It is going over a white primer, so it should cover fairly well. If you're doing the ivory over bare wood, be aware of any knots or dark spots that might require maybe doing a little primer over those first, or even just a white paint to kind of block it out to start. Kills is a type of primer that is good for blocking knots in different wood, particularly pine, that can be sappy, and it will bleed through your paints if you don't block it. So I'm careful to do the edges. If this is really rough piece of wood, you might want to get some sandpaper to sand it down. A little rough's not too bad as long as it's not splintery, because this is a bit of a rustic project. So if it's looking a little rough, that's okay. Even a piece of weathered board would be interesting for just the look of the scarecrow, as if it's been out in the field. This is very whimsical and allows for very folk arty, that you can keep it very primitive and it really fits the look. And what's nice about scarecrows is they're very seasonal for the entire season of fall. They work for Halloween all the way up through Thanksgiving. So it's a nice decoration you can keep out for many months. Get one good solid layer of color, and particularly on the rough edge, it's going to absorb a lot more paint than the flat surface. So make sure you're covering that well. I'm not addressing the back at this time. You can paint the back, but it's going to be either propped up on a shelf leaning against the wall and may not even be seen, so don't feel obligated to paint it completely. Okay, and a hairdryer will just move this along. And one more coat should do it. And rinse your brush. I'm just going to allow that to dry on its own since I'm moving on to the top hat. And it's a different color, which is brown. And apply it the same way with the flat brush. This color is going on a little streaky, almost like a stain in effect, and I actually kind of like that. It has a little bit more, again, of a rustic look. If you want solid coverage, I would plan on doing several coats, but if you like this effect with your paint, feel free to just do one coat. And if you are getting that streak, make sure you're doing your brush stroke all in one direction. That way it looks planned. And be sure to get all your edges, particularly the rough edge with extra paint. It will absorb most of it. While that is drying, you're going to do the same paint on your shim or scrap wood that you have for the brim of your hat. And I think one coat will also work for this as well. Let's get those edges. I do want to use the hair dryer on this because I want to work with it and I need it to be completely dry. Okay. So working with the brim of your hat, we want to actually measure off. I want to make sure I'm putting the straw for the hair of our scarecrow over on the sides of our face. We want to make sure, I don't want to extend it beyond the face too much because it won't look natural that it's part of the scarecrow's face. So with a pencil, just mark off where the end of the face is here on your piece of wood. That way we know we'll keep our hair. And I was using raffia or straw. You can find this in the craft store. Perhaps you have it at home. And to attach it, I'm going to use a hot glue gun. And we don't want to make it too thick, so just make sure we run staying within the area that we just marked off. I'm going to adhere, and we can always trim off any excess that stands above. Be careful not to burn your fingers, but we do want to press it down into the glue and kind of sweep it off to the side a little bit too so it clears the face and we're not blocking any features on our face. And I want to make sure it lies flat when we go to put it on the scarecrow directly. We need to give a haircut afterwards, we can do that as well. And do it on both sides of the face, or the brim, so it's coming on both sides of the face. You may not need too much to accomplish this. Just a little accent. It is a little messy, but it all works. You can try it to be sure it goes to the side of your face. If you want to add, I might add a little bit to each side just to make sure it looks full. And then to adhere it, we're going to add across the entire width, just between where it ends and where we've added. We can add a little bit more to the top just so it lies flat and is secure. And follow the line that you've created at the beginning. And we can trim off any of the extra straw at the end. If it's still showing, I'm just going to pull it around. But we want to clear the face so we can add the features. And even with the straw being a little wild, we know that's what a scarecrow looks like, so that works. And before I add the features, actually, I want to make sure I add the little bandana because that's going to frame our face. I don't want to be caught short not having spot for my bandana, especially while we're using our hot glue gun. I've cut a scrap of fabric that's about 3 inches by 6 inches, and whatever size your board is, you want to just measure it out to make sure it fits. I'm actually going to have it off the bottom, so it actually will, as it's on display, kind of fold up. So I'm going to leave enough room so I can create a face in the center. And I'm going to run a bead of glue across the section that I feel will actually work at the bottom here. And adhere that, making sure you leave a little extra to wrap around the corner, and carry it to the back if you want as well. Okay. So when you go to display it, that way the neckerchief, or it represents a little bit, almost like a bandana, can kind of fold underneath and you see the fabric coming forward. I chose to use buttons for the eyes, but you can draw them in with a marker or with paint. You can paint them in. I'm going to place those first just so I have a reference for where I'll place our nose. A little bit of hot glue. Watch your fingers as you press down. And using a small flat brush and a little orange paint, I'm going to create a nose, and all you're going to do is sort of an elongated triangle. And you can sketch it in ahead of time if you like, or just freehand it. It doesn't have to be perfect because scarecrows are rarely perfect. They're always handmade, and that's a little bit off at times, so that actually works in your favor. Just let it read very simply like that. And one coat should actually do it. Usually the scarecrows have an element of a stitched face or mouth, and that's I kind of like. I saw a smile that was crooked and all over, and that really takes the pressure off of making a smile look perfect. In fact, it's even better if it's not. And give it a few stitches, and I'm using a Sharpie marker which goes right over our paint. As long as the paint is dry, you do want to make sure that it is. And just a few little stitches like that. Maybe give them a little eyebrow. Don't make them angry though, unless you want them to be. And the final touch we can add is a little fall silk leaf. And again, with your hot glue gun, just find a spot maybe on the hat and just give it a little touch of fall in the corner there. Remove all your little glue webs before you put them on display. And if he needs a haircut, give him a trim, but he kind of looks fun without being a little wild. I like him.